As the stalemate on the Western Front continued into the fall of 1917, the Allies decided to attack along a 10-kilometer section of the German line. Their objective was Cambrai, a major German supply center. The attack on Cambrai was also important as it was the first time the Allies would use tanks in large numbers. The terrain was ideal. It was relatively flat and had not been greatly disturbed by shelling. The first waves of Allied tanks and infantry quickly overwhelmed the Germans. Just after 10 a.m., the Newfoundland Regiment began advancing towards its objective, Magnier.
The village of Magnier was heavily fortified, especially near the lock. The Germans were well positioned to prevent us from crossing the canal. As the attack continued, our casualties began to grow. Then a tank, moving along the canal bank, saw the situation and came to our aid. Rumbling up towards the lock, it poured shell after shell into the German defenses. Eventually, the Germans began to retreat. Before 2 o'clock, we had secured the lock. We then pressed on southward towards Magnier. We fought our way along the bank of the canal, and by sunset reached the edge of the village. We organized into small parties, and during the night cleared Magnier of the enemy.
By the next morning, all but a few patches of the village were in Allied hands. Over the next several days, the Allies continued to gain ground, but their advance slowed. By November 29th, with soldiers suffering from fatigue and lacking reinforcements, the Allies were unable to continue the advance.
On the morning of November 30th, the Germans began to counterattack. We were stationed at the time in Marcoing. We were ordered to proceed to Marcoing Copse and meet up with the rest of the 88th. From there, we were supposed to head off to support the 86th, which was on duty from the front in Magnier and Les Rouverts. When we got to Marcoing Copse, we were shocked to come literally face to face with the Germans. There was a lot of hand-to-hand combat.
The Newfoundland Regiment was joined by the rest of the 88th Brigade, and for the next several hours the fighting was relentless. By nightfall, the brigade had managed to force the Germans back over a kilometer, saving Magnier and Les Rouverts from being cut off. The next day, on December 1st, the British troops in Magnier and Les Rouverts were evacuated. For 3 days, the Newfoundland Regiment and others from the 29th Division, although hard hit by shell fire, managed to hold a small salient just west of Magnier and Les Rouverts. Meanwhile, the Germans continued to gain territory. With the number of casualties increasing, at 9 p.m. on December 3rd, the British ordered their troops to retreat. The area was now left to the Germans. In the battle for Cambrai, the losses to the Newfoundland Regiment were high. 110 men were dead, and 352 had been wounded. In recognition of the Newfoundland Regiment's contribution at Cambrai and the Battle of Passchendaele, King George V awarded the prefix Royal to the regiment's title. Field Marshal Douglas Haig had these words of praise for the regiment.
The story of the defence of Magnier, and the part the Newfoundland Battalion played in it, is one which I trust will never be forgotten.